Here we go. Okay. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. We've got 4 of you guys here. 4. Awesome. Good. Yeah, and we're going to do China. Have you noticed that? We're doing China. China, China, China. In your notes, you should actually go to, I guess that would be page 3. And just to give you a sense of just like how important this particular video is for your knowledge and understanding of what's going on during the Cold War, particularly among one of the major participants. We talk about the United States a lot, hello, and the Soviet Union, yeah, but China plays a very critical role in the Cold War. And understanding what went on in China from 1949 to 1976 during the time of Mao is very important, because that is going to set up some very important things for you to understand in your own life. Because if I were to ask you the question, which country in the world is of the most interest, perhaps, and concern for people living in the United States today? Raise your hand if you would say China. Really? You feel threatened by Canada? Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're going to be like, South Africa, yeah. They have a way of coming from the southern part. Yeah, I mean, some of you guys are like still Russia and so forth, you know, and Russia certainly is an important country to keep an eye on. But China, and here's the reality, write this down. China today is a strong country with a strong economy, and I think the world's largest population, just more than India. But, write this down, China started out in 1949, communist China, as very weak. Okay, so we're going to tell the story of China under the leadership of Mao Zedong in 2 videos. And as you look at that, you're like, oh my gosh. Usually, like when we're doing an episode of this, like CNN, Cold War, and so forth, I got 2 or 3 lines of things that you need to know. Look how many lines I've got for each of the videos. And those videos are about the same length as one of the CNN Cold War videos. Do you see how many things there are in there? Oh my gosh, it's like here's the first episode from 1949 to 1960. Mao Zedong, People's Republic of China, mass campaigns, struggle meetings, land reform, Liu Xiaoxi, Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, Cheng Xing, Peng Dehuai, resist America and aid, I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're like, do you have to know all those? Yes, you're going to be taking some furious notes, right? Because in my notes here that I'm going to be giving you associated with this particular stuff having to do with China, it's a lot. Let me see. I've got like handwritten notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of notes that I'm going to be instructing you on from those videos. My typical like CNN Cold War videos, a couple pages. So this is big, important stuff. Okay? And because I traditionally don't do lots and lots of slides. I've got this slide and this slide. So you're going to be having to like hear me out as we go through this. Okay? You're going to see it all in the video. And I'll post the links and so forth. And I'll probably post the links ahead of time so that you can watch it whenever. But we'll be doing notes on it today. We'll be doing notes on it next time. And probably this is going to stretch out into like about 3 different periods at least. Because it's very, very, there's a lot of important stuff going on here. So we'll see how it plays out. By the way, what else are you guys going to be working on? Some of you intensively, some of you not so much, because you already got a lot of it done already in your first draft or other corrections between now and the last time I talked to you about your paper. You're working on your IA, right? So happy Thanksgiving. Okay? And that's due to me December 18th. Okay?
So we still have like 2 weeks of December to start.
The weather's getting cold. Your battery for your Dodge car will not start. Actually, this is actually a serious thing, because do you know what you're going to be doing that week before the end, right before Christmas break? And the day before Christmas break is when mine is done. You got like half of your exams and assessments. You already knew that, right? The teachers were, and you guys were like, oh, that's terrible. I thought we were going to be able to wrap up the semester by Christmas, because that's what everyone voted on, and it was like, I thought that was great. But since we started the year late, like about 3 whatever weeks late, it got kicked over into after the new year. The semester ends after the New Year. And so some of the folks are like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to retain all that over the Christmas holiday because, gosh, Christmas holiday, 2 weeks, there goes all the information in your brain. So what happened is teachers got together and basically half are having their assessment before Christmas and the other half are having it at the end of the semester, which is like January 19th through January 22nd. That's when mine is. That's when mine is going to be. Okay? What? Yeah, mine's after. You know, yeah. And it'll I don't know. I'm going through here and I'm like, I just do it day at a time, day at a time. Obviously, if we do every day, if the seniors are back every day, then I'll be able to have like the equivalent of a normal thing. Yeah, I mean, it can. Having said that, you guys remember, I think I mentioned this already, because IB changed the history exam a little bit. Instead of writing 2 essays for paper 2, put your coin down, thank you. 2 essays for paper 2 and 3 essays for paper 3. It's just 1 essay for paper 2 and 2 essays for paper 3. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Translation, it means like a whole month-long unit that I would traditionally do with seniors in second semester. I don't need to do, and I'm not going to do. I don't have to do that. We're still going to have April as the time where you're going to be predominantly doing lots and lots of essay practice. We're going to calibrate you guys the heck so that when May comes along, yeah, I mean, and seriously, with your hand too and so forth, there was still, that's nothing. 45-minute writing an essay? Yeah, normal circumstances, paper 3, 3 essays, 2.5 hours. Your hands are falling off, right? You're like little dangling things here. But some of you guys, can you handle an hour and a half of writing? Can you handle the truth of doing that? Yeah, actually, you guys, you're a typer, so I don't know. Can you handle the handwriting part? Yeah. Yeah. There we go. This was what I'm talking about, okay? So we need to give you that practice. So anyway, I think we're going to be okay, but it would be nice to have everybody back. And we'll get everybody fit in here. We'll squeeze this thing, and we'll squeeze this thing, and we'll run videos like every day. We'll upload those every day, okay, if that's the case. All right, so you guys ready? China, China, China. Let's cap on what we know about China. Who was in charge of the Chinese government, Tara, throughout like much of the early part of the 1900s? What was the group of people led by Chiang Kai-shek? I'll give you a clue. It starts with N, rhymes with nationalists. Very good. The nationalists were in charge. Okay, Tara, I want you to get a correct answer here. The end of the civil war between the nationalists and the communists, it started out well for the nationalists, but ultimately the nationalists lost. They lost physical control of all of China except for what island province? Right off of the coast of China. Do you know? Now, Japan's a separate country. Taiwan, yeah, Taiwan, okay? Taiwan. And still today, Taiwan is not ruled by the People's Republic of China, right? Who do you suppose has basically said, hey, Communist China, don't try and take over Taiwan. I know you want it, but don't do it. Who's got Taiwan's back through much of the 20th century, now into the 21st century? Us, yeah, the United States of America. Will that continue? Is China stronger than they were back in 1949 when they couldn't take on Taiwan? They're a lot stronger, okay? They're a lot stronger. Is it because of their leader, Mao Zedong? Is it because of this guy right here, Mao Zedong? Or as you can see from my the picture over there in the corner, the guy in the middle. Did Mao Zedong make them a huge financial capitalist success? Answer, no. Okay? So we're going to look into this as we go along. Actually, I've covered this a number of times because I always seem to come back to the theme here. Raise your hand if you can tell me this. It's okay if you don't because you're going to learn this for sure as part of this notes and so forth. Which of these men here, Peng Dehuai on the far left, Zhou Enlai right there, this guy, I don't know his name, Liu Xiaoxi, okay, or, okay, oh, good. And I've got a copy of it already. We'll see you after school. Did you want to? You wanted to, right? Okay, all right, we'll do it. Okay. Thank you. Liu Xiaoxi or Deng Xiaoping? Which of them would you give credit to more for the economic success of China in the last 30, 40 odd years? And actually over here, on my poster over there, it's Deng Xiaoping. Right? Do you remember the clever little things? So we always have these clever little things that help explain. It's like, I understand that. Oh, capitalism is good. Remember the expression about cats? The color of cats? You remember what he said? I must have, some people are like, you've said that 1,000,000 times, Mr. Hansen. Yes? That's another one. Yeah, we'll get to that one too. That's also a very good one. Don't do a change from a communist state-run economy too quickly, otherwise you'll get swept aside and into the river. If you're going to transition to capitalism, do it carefully. Do you remember this one about the cats? Doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white. As long as it catches mice, it's a good cat. Right. Cats and mice. Translate. It doesn't matter what the economic system is, capitalism or communism, as long as it produces wealth for your country, it's a good economic system. So therefore, what is a better economic system that has proven over time that produces more wealth for a country? Communism, state-run economy, or capitalism with more private enterprise? Private enterprise. And so this is you have to be careful, because if you ask Deng Xiaoping, are you saying you're in favor of capitalism? Whoa, that seems very anti-communist. He would go, well, you know what? We're just going to call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. We would call it a fair amount of capitalism. Because if you're in China today and you put together a factory and it makes a lot of money, who's going to be able to keep a lot of that money? No, yes, you. Yes, that's capitalism. If you run a successful private enterprise, you get to keep a lot of it. I mean, you're going to pour a lot of it back into the company in order to maintain competitiveness. You'll want to pay decent wages in order to maintain a highly motivated, well-paid, and satisfied work unit. Right? I mean, you don't run a factory where you're who is it, Scrooge, where you don't even give them a day off for Christmas or something like that? I mean, give me a break. In part. In part. You got to watch that movie again. All right. So, let's back it up. The nationalists lost. Okay? And you can go back and over, and you'll want to look over your notes and so forth. The nationalists lost, the communists won. And it actually is amazing that the communists won, because they almost got crushed in the early stages. We're going to give a lot of credit. Make sure you write this down. A huge amount of credit to Mao Zedong for holding the communists together during difficult times. He was the guy who led them on the Long March, where they're basically escaping from the nationalists. Many of them dying in mountains or getting stuck in swamps and so forth. Eventually making their way to an area known as Yan'an, which is just beyond the reach of the nationalists. And then, of course, the Japanese attacked China in World War II. Who did most of the fighting against the Japanese during World War II? The nationalists or the communists? Nationalists, yeah. They took the full brunt, right? Remember the rape of Nanking? What was the army that surrendered in Nanking and then got completely killed? Was it a communist Chinese army, or was it a nationalist Chinese army? It was a nationalist Chinese army. So the nationalists got hit real hard during World War II. End of the day, Mao Zedong pulls his forces together, wins the Chinese Civil War. But wait, who did Mao Zedong rely upon to provide them with critical military and financial support that helped them to win? Who? Soviet Union. Very good. Write that down. And who was in charge of the Soviet Union at that time? In the 30s, going into the 40s? And actually, he was around until he died in 1953? Stalin. Very good. Make sure you have that down. Okay? Mao Zedong looked up to Stalin. Mao Zedong looked to Stalin as being a very helpful provider of support so that Mao Zedong could set up his communist country in China. Okay? And when Mao Zedong is going to try and develop his country, he's going to look at the template that Stalin had created. Build heavy industry in order to be very strong. Government-controlled heavy industry. Okay? He's going to look up to him. What do you think? Is Mao Zedong going to look up as reverentially, with as much respect for the next guy, Khrushchev? Heck no. You can write that down right now, because that's going to come out in the video quite clearly. You know, when Khrushchev comes along, he's like, I'm in charge of the Soviet Union. Mao's like, you're not nearly as good as Stalin was. And those two countries, by the end of the 1950s, and you'll see this, into the 1960s, they're going to go their separate ways. This is weird. Two big communist countries with a rivalry as which is the greatest communist country. Well, Mao's in charge of China, and he looks over at the Soviet Union going, y'all have gone off on a different path, and I don't respect that. And so there will be great tension. We kind of already covered this a little bit before, right? Who was the American president that's going to go, hey, looks like the Chinese communists and the Soviet communists aren't getting along as well. Let's see if we can drive a wedge between them. Who was that clever American president that was working on that angle? Nixon, yeah. That was one of his things. Yeah, so Nixon was like ultimate. And this is where we're kind of going. Well, by the time we get to the last notes on this particular part, we're going to have Nixon showing up and shaking hands with Mao Zedong and having a nice little conversation there. Okay? All right. So, here's the date. October 1949. The Chinese communists have won. They've come to power, and they create, what is the name of their communist country? People's Republic of China. Very good. PRC. People's Republic of China. Who is the unquestioned leader of China now? Mao Zedong. Understand this. When you see pictures of Mao with other people, like right here, do not confuse yourself. Mao is the guy in charge. You're never going to have in China somebody as absolutely, totally in charge. Even when this guy retires, as we'll tell the story as we go through here, even when he's retired, there ain't no such thing as a retired Mao. He will still have his opinions, and do his opinions matter? Oh my gosh, they matter. Crazy how important they matter. He is going to be seen as like the all-knowing everything. But put this down. He doesn't like criticism. There's going to be a lot of dead people in this story. Oh, yeah. And sometimes it's because of ignorance. You'll be like, hey, I got a great idea to grow a lot of food. And it's really not a great idea. And it's going to lead to 30 million people starving to death. So I didn't intend for them all to die, but it looked like a great idea. Oh yeah, that looks mild in comparison to the thing that's going to happen on Mao's watch. But good luck trying to tell Mao, it was your fault that all those people died. You don't want to do that. Let's identify some of the people in here, just so that we know the cast of characters. You ready? Because when you tell the story, it does help you to know this, because you do need to know these various different people. Let's start on the far left. You see that there? Peng Dehuai. Write it down. Peng Dehuai. He is, these are all contemporaries of Mao. So it's like these guys were with Mao on the Long March. They were with Mao at the beginning of the People's Republic of China. Peng Dehuai is going to be mostly known as a general. Got that? Peng Dehuai, we'll see him as a general in charge of a lot of the Chinese forces during the Korean War. Peng Dehuai. He's also going to run into some issues because if he comes to Mao later on and says, hey, Mao, you know, I really don't like kind of what you're doing here and so forth. Do you know people that are really sensitive to criticism? How many of you guys have people in your life that are really sensitive to criticism? And you're trying to put this constructive advice to them to help them and move things forward. But sometimes you're like, you know what? I just don't know that I'm going to do that. Because it's just going to blow up into my face. And this is not going to work out well for me. So you think, okay, there's somebody else that can say the exact same thing, and I'm going to get them to do it, right? So it's like, you know, you get the younger sibling or whoever has got the trust and so forth. Yeah. Peng Dehuai don't care. Peng Dehuai will go up to Mao and go, hey, you need to do this, this, this. He talks to him like he did when they were back, you know, young commies. But here's a problem. Mao is going to be like, that's not okay. And he'll be like, out. He'll be out. I'm trying to think if he ends up getting deaded. Some of the other ones, they're sort of like, as you go through the story, you really don't want to be out because you're at least going to lose your position. Now, if you're a low-ranking person that happened to be on the wrong side of things, yeah, you could be dead. You're going to learn about struggle meetings. Oh, my God. Struggle meetings. Yeah, you think what is the term now, getting canceled? Oh, cancel culture? Makes cancel culture look like a picnic. Cancel culture? That's like you wrote something down about something and your opinion is now considered wrong, and so like you might lose your job, you might lose your business, you might lose some friends and so forth. Shame on you for having that particular point of view. Right? It's a way of basically saying we don't like what you're saying and doing, and if we have the ability, we will make there be some like social and economic, pow. A struggle meeting? That's where the whole community comes together and bangs drums, does all kinds of noise, hangs a thing around your neck, screams at you for days and days and days, and then might actually take you out ultimately and shoot you or just torture you and beat you up to death. If you're lucky, you can get through a struggle meeting basically with like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Can I go now? Like after several days. In the video, it's fascinating because there's this one guy. He's a smart guy. He knows how to handle struggle meetings. And so he'll say what he needs. How many of you guys have known people, maybe yourself, that have said things to get out of trouble, even though you didn't necessarily believe it, but you're like, I know what to say to get out of trouble. That guy is that one. It's fascinating. I love watching it in the thing because he goes through this struggle meeting, and then there's another struggle meeting like several years later, and then there's another struggle meeting, and eventually there's going to be one that's like so bad, they're going to take his young adult son, and they're going to be struggling with him. And the father loves his son so much, he's like, listen, son, you know what you have to do? Because I'm the cause, because he was like the son of a capitalist, farm owner or something like that. And they're struggling against him, and they're struggling against the son. He's like, son, you're going to have to disown me. You're going to have to say that you have nothing to do with me, because otherwise they're going to kill you. You have to say something that's not necessarily true, in other words, in order to save your own life. And so the father is willing to sacrifice the relationship that he has with the son in order to... Yeah. Yeah. It is sad. This is a very powerful set of videos, and there's some parts in it you're going to be like, oh my gosh. But it will help you understand, because, make sure you write this down, it is a time of upheaval. Upheaval. This is the first time in history that you have a guy in charge, and you're like, well, they've had emperors before, and Mao is like an emperor, all-powerful, all-knowing. But what is he basing it on? Traditional Chinese thinking and Confucianism and, Chinese religious beliefs and thoughts and so forth? No. Communism. His version of communism, as in the collected works of Mao's thoughts, quotations of Chairman Mao, things that he says. His view of communism. Is it the same as Stalin? Not exactly. It's the same as Lenin? Less so. What about Marx? Who's Marx? I mean, Marx is the creator of communism, but it goes through several permutations by the time it's actually carried out in China. And if you look for communism today in China, you're not going to see the same economic thinking. You are going to still see the same, write this down, the Communist Party is in charge. Write this down, because that is a consistent from 1949 all the way up until the present. The Communist Party is in charge. Okay? I mean, you can have white cats and black cats and so forth, setting up factories. All right, here's a couple of the other ones I'm going to tell you about. Zhou Enlai, write his name down. There it is, Zhou Enlai. Sometimes we refer to him as Smiling Joe. A lot of times in the videos he's smiling. Very high stature, very well beloved among the people, and particularly communists. Zhou Enlai. Okay, you're going to hear about him quite a bit. Zhou Enlai, though, knows his position. People look at him as like he's the number 2 guy, but I mean, it's not like, here's number 1 and there's number 2 right next to him. Mao is number 1 and everybody else is way down there. So Zhou he's going to be very hesitant to directly criticize Mao. In fact, I don't know that he ever does that. Will he work behind Mao's back in order to get good, positive things done? Perhaps, as long as he's not getting caught. Liu Xiaoxi, this is going to be a sad story. Liu Xiaoxi is another top communist, and actually, like Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping, Liu Xiaoxi will look and go, okay, what practically can work for China as far as the economy? And they're going to look and go, let me see, well, what's going to make the economy work? Maybe a little dash of capitalism? Maybe a little capitalism will work? Shh, don't say that. That's heresy. Can you use the word heresy to describe something in a non-religious context? It's like political heresy. You know, it's like that doesn't go with Mao's things. And then Deng Xiaoping, another top communist. And he's going to be the survivor. Let's go ahead and identify this, because I think we have perhaps in the past, and make sure you have it in your notes. When Mao dies in 1976, who's going to ascend to the top position in the communist hierarchy? Deng Xiaoping. And he'll be there all the way until, I want to say, like the early 90s. And what's going to happen on his watch? What are they going to introduce into China that's ultimately going to prove economically successful? Exactly. Yeah, you're going to get a whole douse of capitalism and so forth. And people in America are going to be like, whoa, China is going to be just like us. Just the market economy part, the capitalism part. Not the like total free speech and democracy and all that kind of stuff that we have over here in our country and in European countries. That's not what they're interested in. Who do they still want to be in charge? The Communist Party. And that's what's going to be developed during that time period. We'll just go quickly here. There is actually Mao has a wife, and you're like, why are we talking about Mao's wife? She is going to be very important. Jiang Xing, write her name down. Jiang Xing, we will see her ultimately very important in the story as we get near the end of Mao's life. Okay? She was a former actress. In the early years of communist China, is not going to be playing a really big role. It's not going to be as well, you're not going to be out there in front on political stuff. But by the end, she's going to be very, very politically active. Jiang Xing. In fact, she will outlive her husband. And there will be a clash between Jiang Xing and a man that she actually would prefer to have died during her husband's lifetime. Deng Xiaoping. Oh, we got a setup going on here. Deng Xiaoping versus Jiang Xing. Who's going to win? He's going to. Jiang Xing is going to spend the rest of her days in prison. But she tried to get this guy first, and she will get this guy dead. Oh, well, you'll see. We got a lot of stuff. Because her views are more radical. She's not interested in sort of like any kind of capitalism or any kind of thing like that. She wants more radical views. All right, so let's see how this all develops. You guys ready? Let's leave it on this slide right here. China, 1949, Mao is in charge. The old regime is gone. It was corrupt. It was bankrupt. China, under the communists now, have a lot of things they need to do. Number one on their agenda, develop modern industry. Okay? Develop modern industry. China's got 1/4 of the world's population, but their economy is not 1/4. Their industry is not 1/4 of the world's industry. So they're going to be like, when they need to do things. There's a lot of things to do. So what is Mao going to do? He's going to be like, okay, we're communists now. Let's get to it. Boom. Right away, there's going to be political reforms. Okay? They are going to administer the country with a party component, political party component, just like they do in the Soviet Union. A political party component with party reaching all the way down to the local level. So you will have party officers in every village, all over the place. You'll have this party apparatus all over China. Got it? And they're going to introduce new reforms. Now, some of them you look and go, well, that sounds like a good reform. How about this one? Should we keep the old traditional Chinese thing of foot binding young girls when they're little? No, and actually in a lot of places they've gotten rid of that, and they're like, no, we're going to definitely get rid of that. Women get rights. You can write this down. This is a positive development. On paper, women are getting rights. They are legally equal. You can't have any more arranged marriages. You're like, yay, wow, that's pretty cool. Gosh, took all that to do that? You're also going to have the party establish work units in all the various different areas. All right, so you're going to see a little bit of that kind of autonomy that might have existed previously. That's going to be set aside. You're going to have housing work units, health work units, education work units. the government, the party, is going to have more direct control over people's everyday lives. Do you understand that? I mean, this kind of thing put in place is going to be very, very important because later, actually after Mao, when the Chinese are like, there's too many people in this country, we're going to have population problems. Well, let's just have a one-child policy. That actually happens after Mao's gone. A one-child policy. How are they going to carry that out? What are they going to have the party, the government, keep track of whether or not you're pregnant? Yes. How do they know if you're pregnant or not? How's the party going to know if you're pregnant? They're going to check. For every potentially fertile female in that community, they will keep a card, a scorecard. Because there's something that happens, or I should say doesn't happen, when a pregnancy occurs. Ooh, you're like, that's very personal. You mean the government knows whether or not? Every time. So if a female doesn't have that time of the month, the government knows, and they're like, oh, you're pregnant. And then they're looking around going, I see you already have a kid. What a mess. I mean, what possible harm can come, because they don't have this anymore, what possible harm can come from a Chinese communist government? This is after Mao. Basically having a one-child policy. Well, let me see, is there any favorability between males and females? Males are favored. So many females are going to be actually killed, infanticide. Many little Chinese girls are going to be put up for adoption, for foreign adoptions and so forth. And if you go to China today, within that population group, you see a disparity. I want to say, you can double check it yourselves, I want to say it's about 60% male, maybe even a little bit higher, and the remaining are female. And you're like, how did you get that disparity? I thought it roughly comes out equal. Well, if you kill off, because the government says, one-child policy, how are they able to carry that out? They've got their checks in all levels of society. Yeah, question? Yes. If you understand the government is the party, that will help a great deal. Yeah. Work units. Work units. Yeah, so everybody, you would be in a work unit. Okay, so if you have a, yeah. So the party would be making sure that you're like, okay, you're in this thing. And it's kind of like so they can keep an eye on you, and other people within your unit can keep an eye on each other, and everybody knows what everybody's up to. Okay? All right, now. Oh, here we go. You ready? Now this is a promise. Mao promised, and he carried forth on this promise, this component of the promise. You ready? Land. He's going to do land reform. It's not going to be like this long, drawn-out land reform that you see in some other parts that we've covered in the world, like in Mexico and so forth. Oh, no. He takes all of the privately owned land. Write this down. All of the privately owned land, he seizes it from them, and he redistributes it all to the peasants. You got that? And that's what they said they were going to do. That's why they had gotten a lot of peasant support, because peasants didn't have much land at all. And so now they take it from the wealthy landowners, and they redistribute it from all the peasants, among all the peasants. Now, check that, because you're thinking, oh, well, the peasants are going to like that, and they're going to have land forever and ever and ever. Wrong. It's not going to be too long before the government itself will take the land back on behalf of everybody and run all of the farmland as government-owned land. You understand that? So the first step is to redistribute it among the peasants. Okay? And we're going to have struggle meetings. You're going to see the very first of the struggle meetings. Make sure you write this down. Struggle meetings in all the various different villages. The villagers will be encouraged by communist officials to round up the landlords, the people who used to have the land, and their families, and struggle with them, and talk about what they've done. That was wrong, and do this, and do that. And you'll hear the one guy that I talked about who eventually will encourage his son to disown him. When he is very young, he's a son of a landlord, and so he's being struggled with. They're like in his face, in his face, in his face. And he's like, I apologize. Write that down. That's the best tactic. Apologize, apologize, apologize. Thank you so much for pointing out all these errors. Thinking in your head, I didn't have these errors before, but now that I see this large angry crowd of villagers in my face, I am going to admit to whatever you want me to admit to in order to survive. Yeah, so I mean, even if you weren't, I mean, if you were like a middle-sized landowner and so, you lost your land. You were a landlord. So what, I mean, what's the consequence of lots of struggle meetings? People chewing you out in public hour after hour after hour in your face. And your position, you'll see this in the thing, because when you see videos, they're like this. They're looking down. They don't look back and challenge you and so forth like you might get in America. Hey, whatever, I'm going to answer my back. No, you're expected. And sometimes they'll have a whole, a big placard with all of your offenses and so forth. You'll see this later on. If they have a big X on there, that means they've already decided that after they finish struggling with you, no matter what you say, you're going to be executed. So how many people are going to die as a result of struggle meetings? I mean, that they go too far and not just get the apologies. You're going to have over 100,000 people dead as a result of struggle meetings. At that stage, this is the initial stage. But if you're a peasant, who gets some land, you're like, hey, this is pretty good. Everything's going to be cool. Land reform. Right? In the video at this point, then they introduce Liu Xiaoxi, second in authority, cautious, reserved, the foreign minister, the premier, Zhou Enlai, very popular, very loyal, never challenges Mao. You've got Deng Xiaoping, who we're going to be talking about quite a bit as we move forward, particularly afterwards. You've got Mao's wife, Jiang Xing. These are all going to be introduced at that point in the film, in the documentary. And they make the point that in Mao's mind, nothing is sacred. No theory is sacred. Eventually, later, you'll hear about one of the people that put together all his quotations, right? Like a Mao Bible or something. And there will be people literally waving it and going, oh my gosh, this is just like the truth, the truth, the truth. Although on closer analysis, you've got pieces and things and so forth in there that contradict each other. And if you tried to quote Mao, what he had said previously before, what matters today is what Mao thinks today. And if you agreed with Mao yesterday, and Mao doesn't agree with what he said yesterday, but you still do, you're wrong. Yep. He brought them to victory. He established the People's Republic of China. Okay? But, I mean, it's you have to be careful. I mean, obviously, these people are going to know you have to be careful. All right, so we got this. He gets support from the Soviet Union. Write this down. He gets support from the Soviet Union, establishes a mutual defense treaty with the Soviet Union. Very good. And he's looking around going, there's danger, because right over there, right next to China, communist China, there's some people that are like, hey, maybe they're going to overthrow communist China. It's not like there's any U.S. generals, MacArthur, who's talking about actually undoing the communist triumph in China. Write this down. 1950, we already covered it. 1950, June of 1950, the Korean War breaks out. Who attacked who in the Korean War? Terry, do you remember who attacked first? Who attacked? The North or the South? Who started the Korean War? It was the North, yeah. The North attacks the South. Basically, you sort of had, the North, which had been under treaty, right? The Soviets got to occupy the North, and they established a communist government up there. And the South, we established a non-communist government there, right? So the North will attack the South, but eventually the United States regroups and pushes the North all the way up to the Chinese border. And is that where it stops? No. October 1950, with the support of the Soviet Union, the Chinese send in the military. So China, within a year or so of the existence of the communist government, is going to be at war with what country? The United States of America and everybody else, South Korea and our other UN allies in that particular conflict. And what's the result of that war going to be? Is China going to win, lose, tie? The Korean War? It was a tie, yeah. I mean, they eventually get the demilitarized zone in between. China will lose a lot of soldiers, but write this down. China is actually going to look back on that and go, wow, we held the powerful United States of America in check. We ultimately fought them at great cost. We held them in check. Write this down. And in the process of that, when they're fighting against America, they undergo what is called a mass campaign. Full-on government mobilization, Write this down. Mass campaign is the government sending out a message, and they always have like quotes. They always have like a theme. Look in your notes. This mass campaign is going to be called Resist America and Aid Korea. So let's understand what a mass campaign is in China. And this one is going to be donating money for the war effort and mobilize the population and get the message out. It's full-on propaganda. And it'll work. And we'll see many more mass campaigns as we move forward on this. I think we're done with time. So we're going to pause it right there. Yeah, we'll continue on with the 1950s, and we'll talk about Mao's dance parties. Did you guys ever see the video that students did the one year? You did. So you don't want to watch that again. But that was based on representations of what Mao actually did in the 1950s. Anyway, so yeah, more interesting notes coming your way.